Come to order. We have a quorum tonight. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Craig Sklenar, General Planner. I apologize. I accidentally left minutes out on your packet. There's a copy of minutes in front of you on your desk. We can go to that agenda item later if you want a little bit to review them, but it's a quick synopsis of the August meeting, if anybody can remember that one.
We will defer the approval of the minutes so that people can read them, and we have some guests. We have one item that is not on the agenda, which is the new Open Meetings Act. And is someone going to speak to that from staff?
Good evening, Chairman Peters, members of the Plan Commission, Michelle Mason-Cup, Assistant City Attorney. The memorandum is just intended to be a communication to let you know that there's a training course that's required for members of the Plan Commission. You have over a year to complete it. It should take around a half an hour. I've done it myself. At the end of the training course, just print out the certificate and give it to Craig, and then we'll be in compliance with the statute. If you have any other further questions from the memorandum, feel free to email me. Thank you.
And again, the link to that course is on the memorandum itself, digitally given to you through communication this week.
The city manager has asked that the rules of the Plan Commission be reviewed, and the members of the subcommittee, the Rules Subcommittee, met and reviewed the proposed changes. They were distributed in the packet, and there are a few corrections since the packet was printed. I turn the mic over to Craig.
Good evening. Thank you. First to go, there was a small typographical error on page 4, item G, number 2, to conduct such public hearings as provided, not are provided, as provided for in the municipal code as amended. Sorry, yes?
What is highlighted is that's what's changed, I'm taking it. Is that correct?
Yes, what is highlighted in yellow per my email, what was highlighted in yellow bold are proposed changes. They're minor. We want to make sure that we wrap in the municipal code referencing things like ethics and things that are already established in procedure. We have modernized some of this. We used to reference a court reporter, which we no longer use as our transcript procedure. We use recorded video recording or any type of recording for public hearings that require votes. So if we can just kind of quickly go through some of these changes, we could talk about them if you have any questions. What was highlighted in green and is in italics, there's an additional sheet that was in front of you tonight. These were items that needed to be addressed in front of our law department. I proposed to you tonight to actually strike Article 13, Section E, pertaining to adoption of reports. As a recommending body, this is not what was Dennis Marino and myself as something that was essential for a full adoption. These are essentially saying that you would adopt memos, and as a recommending body, there's not necessary from our interpretation for that.
You're proposing this Articles 13.0.
Yes, ma'am. If you could go to page 4, Article 4 membership, item D.
Are we going to talk about item appointee under Article 13
when we get there? Thank you.
Because you brought it up, so it's just...
Yeah.
And if you have other sections that haven't been changed that you want to comment on or change, you should raise it. not just the changes. Go ahead.
All right. Article 4, membership. Item D, appointments of regular members shall be for 3 years, and they may be reappointed for 2 additional terms. So a total of 9 years for regular membership. This was brought up by the Rules Committee as a suggestion that sometimes planning efforts here take a little extra longer, and retaining that intellectual knowledge on the commission would be necessary. Questions on that one? No. Page 5, Article 5, ethics. Commission members shall abide by the city's code of ethics set forth in section 1-10-4 in the municipal code as amended. That's a new addition. We wanted to make sure that it was pointed out specifically in its own article. Article 6, officers. It used to say secretary. There would be a secretary on your commission, but city staff handles that duty. Also, we amended item F to, it used to say prior to each meeting, the director of the department would send a communication to the chair. We just removed that for each meeting. There will be a communication if he appoints a different secretary to this position. Page 7, under Article 6, meetings. Item E, a recording shall be prepared for all commission meetings that include actionable agenda items. Minutes shall be prepared for all commission, committee, and subcommittee meetings. Each such record shall become a part of the permanent record. This is a slight change from what we used to do with court reporters. We used to have a court reporter at every meeting. So there will always be minutes, and there will sometimes be recordings. If there are actionable items, that is when we'll have a recording, but there will always be minutes of record, if that makes sense.
No, doesn't make sense. So the minutes are
Yes.
I don't see how this accurately reflects what's discussed, you know. So if there are any questions about a meeting, there's no way to get back to that.
If it's a hearing, it must be recorded. So if it's an action on an application or a hearing on a zoning change, it has to be recorded.
We're changing from all meetings of the Plan Commission being recorded to just those that have some type of action.
Right. We could have minutes that have a little more detail.
So I'm assuming legal has looked at this and said that's okay then.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that there are sometimes things that are discussed that you want records of, or somebody may want a record of. You're laughing over there. I mean, I can seem to remember, you know, when we were working on the downtown plan and there was lots of contentious issues being brought up, that
was considered an actionable item, though, and those would be recorded.
Okay.
When we're having discussions about the comprehensive plan, about how we would approach something but make actually zero actions on it, we don't record those types of meetings.
So if you have a meeting about an action, even though you're not making any decisions in that meeting, it will still be recorded because
Yes,
you are discussing an action.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If it's just to
like
hang
the
out and
last
have birthday cake, then we don't need to record it. Is what you're
right.
saying.
We're trying to make it clear on the efficiency of how we document all meetings.
Okay.
The other piece
You do understand my
that's
concern,
required by
my
statute
question.
is minutes of subcommittees have to be made and kept by the secretary and made available to the public.
I have a question about this report.
Please turn on your microphone for recording. We are recording tonight.
We are recording tonight. All right.
Oh.
I have just a question that I'm not sure if it's part of a statute or something else. But having gone through a discussion at the university about how hard it is to maintain records, especially digital ones, is there an expiration? So do they become permanent part of the record so that in the year 3020, when I want to review this recording, it should be available somewhere? Or is it like after 5 years, you just toss this out? Because that requires a huge infrastructure of archivists to keep
I would
it
agree.
alive.
Yes, and for your city attorney who has to keep such records. The city, actually the state of Illinois has a local records commission which prescribes statutes for the state, and the requirement for recordings is 60 days, but minutes must reflect what happened in the meeting, and those must be kept for a prescribed period of time. The city has schedules for all of your meetings and all of your minutes, for which we can then destroy the minutes once. Probably, I can't remember the time period, but it's a long period of time. The statute under 5 ILCS 122.05 governs recordings of meetings, and it actually discusses that people may record proceedings, and the statute states in part, the authority holding the meeting shall prescribe reasonable rules to govern the right to make such recordings. And then the city is acting on its ability to make rules for its own recordings, and that's what you're doing.
When we have recordings that essentially substitute for minutes, do you know how long they are kept under the current city rules?
I believe it's 60 days, but I can get back to you.
I think we need...
The city law department will respond, but I don't want to make a hip shot reaction.
I think we need 5 years, maybe more. We frequently have matters come back. Actually, 5 years is too short. We have matters come back for revisions 10 years, 15 years later.
I will double check it. It sounds like I am far off based on your statements. But
it may not have
whatever
been considered.
period of time we need to keep them, the city keeps them under the statute and the local records commission.
If it's short, then we probably need to put that in our rules for a long period, because things come back years later. Someone wants to change.
The law department will verify the period of time and respond to it at the next meeting.
I really wouldn't leave this to the law department. I think we should keep these records, these recordings for 20 years, because things do come back.
That's right.
And we want a complete record. And the minutes, the current minutes that we see are inadequate.
They're summary.
They're very summary.
Yeah, and we just had that come back on the Presbyterian, and that was how many years? 40 years? They were bringing up stuff?
Yeah.
I think it went past 20.
It was 1992.
I have to comment on that, though, is that we have transcripts, but we don't have minutes that are as detailed as you think they are.
But
the transcripts that are provided, we still have microfiche from that time period.
But the problem is we're substituting recording for transcripts.
And then the other point is I wanted to say is that when I became a member of the Plan Commission, it was in the middle of the downtown. Wasn't the middle, but it was the downtown plan had already been under discussion for at least 6 months, and I had to read, literally a box of minutes to be able to participate. And if we make it the 60 days, then how does somebody then be able to participate?
I don't know. I will double check that. And also, when they're transcribed onto paper, it's supposed to be, as you know, reflective of exactly what was said.
But we weren't transcribing anymore.
No, we keep the transcripts.
We don't transcribe anymore.
No. It's just video.
I'm talking about the past meetings. We have them all
yes.
on microfiche. You were talking about the 1992 meetings. We have those transcripts. So that your concern regarding past meetings in West Evanston Plan, we have previous transcripts. I don't know when it stopped.
We're concerned going forward.
Going forward, and I was using the past meetings as an example.
I will say that every video that we've been doing, which is about 18 months now, is posted online under our agendas and minutes, and I would expect any new commission member that come in would be able to access those, be able to watch the videos, and understand what's happening.
But currently, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? But currently, how long are those videos kept?
We're keeping them right now indefinitely.
Okay, okay.
We don't catalog. I mean, on our agendas and minutes page, we have everything back to 2004, 2003, just online. But we have a warehouse of digital information that we keep in access as well that dates back to 98, 99. And then everything else is up in storage and beyond that.
Any other questions regarding minutes and recordings?
I clearly see an edge of transcripts over videos, though, because a transcript you can skim, you can even do a text search. A video, might shave years of our life expectancy.
It's true. I've had the pleasure of looking at videos of trials in Michigan where they no longer do transcripts. It is extraordinarily time-consuming. You are correct.
But unfortunately, we were spending thousands and thousands of dollars each year on that, and in an era of really tight budgeting, we have to be creative in how we keep all of our records at this point.
Is that because we had a transcriber?
Yes.
But now we have digital video that can be sent off somewhere else where it's cheaper to type. We can outsource the transcription.
Yeah, that's beyond both of us to investigate at this time. We are, I remember when we switched to this, it was more in compliance with State of Illinois' regulations on keeping track of meetings. This is a compliant way from our understanding. But we could look into that, and we don't have an answer for you tonight. So.
Craig? Yeah, I mean, from my vantage point, it appears that the timeline, the length at which you keep it, at this moment you're saying that the city's intention is to house it for indefinite period of time. I think we need to basically clarify that. So, because it needs to be stated somewhere, right? It needs to be stated somewhere that if Quasi needs this, I can actually call the city and this literature will be available 20 years, 30 years from now.
Might I propose that we take this section back into city staff's hands and come to you with a proposal at the November meeting on that, provided with more detailed research on our current record-keeping practices versus how we will handle things in the future.
I think that's a good idea.
All right.
I think I would suggest also exploring the transcription services elsewhere, because you're going to face not just the issue of taxing commissioners or anyone who wants to review this video with a very time-consuming process, but also you're going to face the issue of long-term archival and changes in format and the space that videos take, which is a lot of hard drive. So that might be more costly in the long run.
We'll research all aspects.
DASD is very cheap. I would think that you can buy a 3 terabyte drive for $120.
These are enterprise level servers. They're a lot more expensive. Believe me.
You're right. So maybe they're $500 for a drive.
We will investigate all of our record keeping practices currently. I do know that since I started here 2.5 years ago, I keep extensive digital records and try to remain as few paper records as possible. So we keep pretty much anything you need from that time. I have.
Comments on quorum?
Again, please refer to the additional changes to the rules, the little sheet that I gave you. This is a correction from Ken, who couldn't be here tonight. A quorum is required for the transaction of any business. A quorum of the commission shall consist of 5 regular members. The quorum for any committee or subcommittee of the commission shall consist of the majority of the members of the committee or subcommittee.
One more then.
You say one more.
I believe it says one more than.
It's striked through.
Oh.
It's, there's a correction
Please,
sheet.
please refer to the sheet that was provided. Thank you.
There's no such, how do you have
Because-
one more than the majority?
That was the primary issue, is if you have a 3 committee member.
0.75.
Right.
He brought this into conformance with the statute.
Yeah, thanks.
We missed one item, Chairman. Above that was information concerning any pending matter may be obtained from the Secretary of the Commission, consistent with the Illinois Freedom of Information Act as amended. That's a new addition to the rules. Item K on page 8.
What about I? We need to do I on
Oh, I'm
page
sorry.
7.
Sorry about that. I propose to move item I to Article 5, Ethics.
If that is,
Go ahead.
if that is the case, wouldn't the next item also be a subject to ethics as well? Is that a yes?
That's a good point, yes.
I think you are correct. Yeah, J should go in ethics. J on the bottom of page 7 probably should be with the ethics material.
Oh, no, I was asking about, I had a question about I.
Okay, go ahead.
Please turn on your microphone. Thank you.
It's interesting that it applies to interested parties not discussing pending matters with any commission member, but it doesn't say the flip side of that, which would be that no commission member shall discuss any pending matter with an interested party. It seems to me that it should bind both sides.
I think that's reasonable and appropriate.
Would you,
But
Chairman?
Go ahead.
But this is a document that's binding us, and the ethics are for us. So I would say that I don't necessarily agree with that. How do you?
The rules of the Plan Commission are also about how we conduct business, which include interested parties and applicants, and how they procedurally apply to the Plan Commission itself.
Uncle?
But the interested parties aren't getting a copy of this.
They are posted online and are available for viewing at any time.
And they should be getting it when they submit an application or if they talk to staff about objections. They should be informed of it.
What constitutes an interested party?
Interested party is defined as an applicant or a person within 500 or 1,000 feet from a particular application, which we have a little bit later on, I guess. We probably should bring that up closer. Sorry, I'm looking for my exact definition for it. Sorry, I can't find it right this second, but as soon as I do, we can move on if you want to.
The 500 zone is mentioned in page 10 at the end of Article 10. But no, it doesn't define what an interested party is.
Page 13, number 7.
we're skipping, I do have a question.
We're not skipping. We're just trying to provide a definition for interested parties. I propose to place a definition of interested party further up, and we'll come back to you with a recommendation in November of where that should be in the rules.
There may be other terms in here that would benefit from a definition as well. I don't know, but there's one, there's probably another.
I'll sit down with the law department and go over that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Freeman?
I have a question again on the about interested parties. We live in a small community, and I think we should know to the best of our knowledge or ability or something. We're always running into people that have a vested interest in almost everything we do. So from the height of the tower, which was a big deal during the debates on the downtown plan, as a commissioner, I think it's my responsibility to talk to to other people that live in Evanston and understand their views, because I believe I'm a representative of the community by being on the plan commission. Now, am I wrong there? Because in that case, from what I'm reading here, is I would not be allowed to talk to community residents that have issues and concerns with the, in that case, the downtown plan, or all I could do is listen and not give any opinion.
I think you are wrong, because I think we are a recommending body. I think the elected officials are representatives, and they have a duty to listen. I think we have a duty to make a decision based on the record and apply the standards. I think it's improper for us to make a decision based on things other than the record.
Not when you're creating standards.
But we may view the property.
We created standards for the downtown plan, or recommendation for standards for the downtown plan, including height of buildings, setbacks, and everything else.
But there are no interested parties. That's not an application.
So it's just the applicants.
Or applications.
Okay.
And maybe,
I would
maybe
also state that citizens have at any time ability to come provide public comment during these commission meetings as well, should they want to air any of their issues here at the commission.
And maybe we need to limit the interested parties to
Actionable items?
Yes.
Applications, not actionable items, because
where
downtown plan
someone
is an
has
actionable item, but
where someone has applied other than
we will come back to
reference
you
from the
with
city.
recommendations for this in November.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I have a comment in this connection with regard to the orientation that took place for new members. And I actually asked that very question, and quite frankly, the answer that I was given was not along the lines of you shouldn't have discussions on pending matters. So now it may be that for some boards there's a different standard than there is for the zoning board and the plan commission. But I think in orientation of new members, we should be very clear what the standards are, because it was very confusing in that meeting.
I'm going to say something that isn't nice. There was misinformation at my orientation, which was not long before yours, with respect to the Open Meetings Act, and they did not distinguish between various bodies and hearing bodies. And so that's something that the law department might want to look into, so that the information in the training conforms to the statutes and ordinances.
My understanding too is that all these discussions extend not just to one-to-one person discussions, but also to any communication, email, phone, chatting, any form of communication, and it's related to the open meeting standards.
I think that's correct.
I don't think so. Again, I believe that we are making recommendations. I agree when we're making a ruling on existing law. I disagree when we are making a recommendation on new zoning and new law.
Well, this is another matter for the law department, perhaps to inform us of whether our decisions should be based on the record when we're doing hearings.
A hearing is when somebody has an application, correct? Not a meeting of the Plan Commission regarding new hours for dog walkers.
I incorporate that into my question for the law department. What distinction is appropriate there?
We were encouraged to go visit a doggy daycare facility in Evanston while we were making our deliberations, while we were having the conversations about the new regulations regarding doggy daycare, if you recall. So it seems to me that this would
Seth, was that during the zoning committee of the Plan Commission, or was that during a regular Plan Commission hearing? Because that's one thing I'm questioning too. Is does this apply only to commission meetings or subcommittee meetings as well?
I think the invitation to the doggy daycare came when I think somebody was applying for a license, was at least getting ready to apply for a license. That's when it came. But I think if we are still on the issue of I mean, it will be very, very strange for commissioners to actually have conversations outside on an issue that is in front of us. No matter how you cut it, it wouldn't look good.
That's a definition of a hearing, then. If it's something that's brought before us for a variance or something else, not creating law.
Well, if
my perspective, let's just get clarification on that.
And I might remind that you are a recommending body, so
correct.
we're not technically creating law here. We're providing recommendations to council to ultimately provide law.
I think hearing is statutory. I think there's statutory provisions, and I'll be very interested in your report, or maybe you'll have the night off and then we can hear Ken. Thank you. Sure. Stuart?
I don't have any trouble with forbidding a member of the commission from talking with an applicant. I mean, that's the clearest case that I can see. But I have trouble with the notion that I can discuss a project with a neighbor that lives 1,100 feet from the project, but yet I can't discuss the project with someone who lives within that 1,000-foot radius.
And I think that definition is probably not consistent with the statute. But I have not looked at that in 10 years, so.
We have some homework to do.
Any other comments on the material on page 7?
Item K is an augmentation. It pertains to meetings and hearings open to the public shall provide time for material public comment. To allow all comments to be voiced, the following time allotments shall be followed. The comments of individual citizens shall not exceed 5 minutes. That is a new addition. I might want to remind you, item C allows time limits to be modified at the discretion of the chairperson. Reasonable adjustments may be made on a case-by-case basis to accommodate the requirements of extraordinary situations. So we're setting, it's consistent with time limits for groups. We wanted to establish a time limit for individual citizen comment as well. Good. Article 7, item C. Committees and subcommittees shall operate in a manner consistent with the Open Meetings Act as amended and the Illinois Freedom of Information Act as amended. Each committee or subcommittee shall maintain minutes and records of their activities. The secretary to the commission shall keep records of the actions taken by each committee. And again, that's a new addition to be consistent with all regulatory that applies here. There are no changes to Article 8. Article 9, filing procedures for amendments, plan developments, and unique uses. Action B, or item B, in cases where an application must be presented to both the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals, an applicant may request a joint meeting pursuant to Municipal Code Section 6348 as amended.
What does it say about the decision to have joint meetings?
Do you have a zoning code with you?
No.
I forgot my, does anybody have a zoning code with them? I left mine upstairs accidentally.
See what I can find.
I think in the past there have been two separate findings, separate and distinct. The ZBA would make a particular finding followed by the Plan Commission.
This is one of the reasons why I thought it was a good idea. Let me look at the code while we continue discussing. To do that, to have a joint meeting.
Mm-hmm. If ZBA meets during the day, correct?
No.
No.
Doesn't Zoning Board of Appeals meet?
Monday nights.
Monday nights.
Okay.
I think it's Monday.
I thought it was during the day.
I think it's Tuesday nights, actually.
Maybe Tuesday.
Yeah. Because City Council takes up 3 of the 4 evenings now on Mondays.
I have a comment, or actually a question. Was this meant to state that an applicant may request a meeting, but leave it open whether that request would be granted? Is that the intent of this?
No, that's why I'm looking at the code.
Okay.
To see what the decision process was. Mm-hmm. When I raised it at the subcommittee meeting, the response was it's in the code.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, Greg?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, going back to page 8, the comment of an individual citizen shall not exceed 5 minutes. It seems a bit restrictive because if you go to B, a group can actually beforehand request for additional time and be actually able to go longer. And I think we also ought to afford the same opportunity to an individual citizen instead of leaving it at one person's discretion.
That's why item C is in there as well, is to provide that flexibility and that time. It would apply both to A and B as well. The group presentation is a group presentation. It's the idea that collectively their 5 minutes each would equal 20 to 30 minutes as well. There's something larger than an individual citizen comment that they would like to present to the commission on. The individual 5-minute period is regular, just a regular, if you have any kind of comment to bring up to the commission pertaining to issues.
But that is at the discretion of the chairman to basically grant additional time, right?
Yes.
Okay, but then if you look at B can beforehand actually request additional minutes.
Yes.
Before they come. And I'm saying that as a citizen, any citizen in this city should be able to also call staff and say, well, I have more than 5 minutes to say.
I agree with that.
I think 5 minutes is light. I think we probably need some time limits because, let me go back. The manager wanted this looked at because in most places.
Who's the manager?
The city manager, Wally Balkowitz.
Okay, Wally wanted. Okay.
And the director of zoning, economic, and planning, Griffith. Because in most places, when someone applies for business or residential development, the total time is much less. And for them, time is money because they've got money tied up in the project. So the question, it seems to me, is what's an appropriate compromise?
But we're not saying that the 5 minutes is inappropriate. We're saying that's fine. What you're saying is that groups can ask in advance if they know they would like some more time. It can be denied.
Yes.
So what you're suggesting is, and I agree with that an individual, if he wants to thinks he needs 10 minutes instead of the 5 minutes, should be able to ask in advance. You could get turned down, but if you don't, you have time to prepare a 10-minute presentation instead of having to do it at the spot.
So the question is advance.
It's only in advance.
Oh, that
I
makes
agree
sense.
100% with the 5 minutes. So you're saying that makes sense?
Yeah.
Does everybody else think that makes sense?
I think it does.
I agree with you.
So we just put a note,
That's why I spoke up.
advance.
We'll come back with the revised language in November.
Okay.
I do have a comment, though, about B. If you're just going to mirror the language of B, what B says to me is that if the group of citizens requests from staff giving the advance notice additional time, then they will get automatically the 30 minutes. There's no discretion there. It says in which event the comments of the group shall not exceed 30 minutes. So do we want there to be an element of discretion, or do we want to know in advance that the 20 minutes will be stretched to 30 or the 5 minutes will be stretched to 10? I don't care either way. I just think it should clearly show our intent, and if our intent is if they call in early, they get the extra time.
I don't think you
That's
can have
fine.
discretion. I think it has to be.
How much extra
I think
time?
you can have discretion in a meeting, but I think prior to it, I don't see how you give staff the ability.
Well, let's take an example of a very extensive project, and this is the last period of time for testimony in order to keep everyone on schedule. If every citizen then, by virtue of the lack of discretionary decision-making powers on the part of the commission or the city, decides that they want to call, and then a 2-hour meeting then of testimony expands into 4 hours.
Leave it to the conspiracy.
No, it's not a conspiracy. It's just a.
I agree.
So I tend to lean more towards the discretionary side. I mean, we saw in the Presbyterian home, in my opinion, I think an abuse of the amount of time afforded some people. Much regurgitation, So I think there needs to be a level of discretion on someone's part.
Do we need to have a vote on that? So we all concur, or do we all concur then, or Mr. Chairman?
I think we need further discussion because I don't hear I don't hear people concurring. I hear differences.
Well, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but based on the example you gave, I guess it could indeed happen. So I would support discretion.
Well, it's not only a case of discretion. I mean, if you just look at the language, but if you look at A and B, basically with B, you are saying, hey, if you need additional time, you can actually send me a letter, send me an email, and you may get 10 more minutes, right? And what I'm saying, the point I'm arguing is that if I assume that I'm a citizen, I need to make a point beyond 5 minutes, I would be able to send you an email to and basically have a decision made on that. The decision, in this case, ought to be you get 5 minutes too, the other person is also getting another 10 minutes. I mean, that's fair. I don't think we should dwell so much on people abusing it. I think with that Presbyterian home issue, I think it was abuse on both ends of it. So I don't think we should be pinning on anybody.
Do we want to make a non-discretionary increase from 5 to 10 minutes if there's a request to staff?
I would actually propose removing the 30-minute automatic discretion because somebody may only need 25 minutes and not 30 and provide it with a reasonable time limit based on a case-by-case basis.
Well, the difficulty is, I agree that discretion is probably useful. The difficulty is that Seth raises, will they know before they come that they have the extra time, so they prepare?
Right. What I propose is under the individual, we would have the 24-hour notice requirement for if an individual would like to speak longer than the 5 minutes provided for at each meeting, they may request additional time from staff.
No later than 24 hours prior to the meeting.
Correct.
And they may be granted that.
Correct. Which we would notify the chair that.
And then they have a second crack at the apple during the meeting.
A third crack. If he doesn't grant it, a third crack.
Stuart?
I like that particular exception. I would, and we had some trouble with this the other night in the committee meeting. I would like to see all time limits referred to as guidelines only, and allowing the chair full discretion, total discretion to limit or expand discussion or comment.
The problem is that Seth raised was when people come to the meeting and prepare, they will want to know before the meeting if they have extra time.
That's an exception that I would like to. I think that's something that I would approve. That exception. If it could be worked out beforehand, fine. I just wouldn't like to see the chair limited, handcuffed, if you will.
No, I agree.
I would refer to item C again, that
well, I know
all time limits may be modified at the discretion of the chairperson.
Let me raise another issue. Do you want staff making that decision before the meeting?
Well, staff is already making that decision in scenario B.
Well,
so staff ought to be able to make that decision in scenario A.
That's the question I'm raising.
I don't have an issue with staff making the decision if it's the decision every time is the same. I have a problem with, I think there's an issue with staff being on anything that's discretionary, and that should be the prerogative of the chair.
I really don't think B does give discretion to staff.
That's correct. It doesn't give. It doesn't.
And I don't
think
we should
correct.
give staff discretion.
That's what I'm saying.
I think if we have the extra 5 minutes for the individual, that it should run the same way. They call in 24 hours in advance, they ask for 5 extra minutes, they get it. Just like B. And then if they come in to the meeting and say, Mr. Chair, I really need 15 minutes, then Mr. or Ms. Chair could grant it.
And the chair also has the ability in the middle of the testimony to stop the testimony, because that's what this says here, that all time limits may be modified at the discretion of the chair.
Correct.
So I think you're fine with that.
Is that a consensus?
Yeah. I need a summation on what
Was that?
just
I think what was suggested, and no one objected, was there's a 5-minute time limit. Citizens can ask staff 24 hours in advance for an additional 5 minutes, and they will get it. So they would be 10 minutes, and all time limits can be modified by the chair during the meeting. That's what I hear.
And
I don't like it. In the past month, I've reviewed transcripts and zoning ordinances for a couple of large developments, one in California and one in Indiana. And lo and behold, testimony before commissions was limited for individuals was limited to 3 minutes. In my many years on this body, or on either this side or that side, I have not had any experiences as it relates to testimony that gives me cause to believe that an individual can't make their point within 3 to 5 minutes, particularly given that there are oftentimes many individuals that say the same thing. Now, granted, there may be an individual that at the last minute comes across new knowledge or new information that supports their case, or maybe some document or what have you. And in that case, maybe they should, in my opinion, be allowed to call and request additional time. But I think that needs to be discretionary because, frankly, in such a volatile environment when it comes to development, everybody and their grandmother is going to be calling and asking for the additional time. So we might as well just give individuals 10 minutes and all committees 30 minutes and leave it at that. And I think the discretion of the chair is where the discretion needs to fall. It's the chair's responsibility to manage the meeting, to make sure that all important information is conveyed and understood, and that duplicitous information or information that is not, quote, material, unquote, to the discussion is not presented. And so, I think it requires some level of judgment and consideration. So, I'm not against allowing people to have more, but I think it should be discretionary, and I certainly don't want to double individuals' time to 10 minutes.
Mr. Sherman?
No way.
I think, and I think we saw this in the discussion of the Presbyterian homes, that at a certain point it did become repetitious, and the chairman did take the initiative and his responsibility by cutting it short. And I think if somebody asks for 10 minutes and then at minute 3 you realize it's a rehash, then the chairman has every right at that point to say, time to sum up.
Well, I agree with that too. However, I think that also puts a unnecessary burden on the chairman to tell somebody, no, I'm cutting you off. That also, in my opinion, sets a difficult atmosphere.
I think it's difficult to shorten the time if staff has given more.
I would rather have the chair be in the position someone has requested an additional, say, minute or 2 minutes over whatever we allow, over the 5 minutes. And I would rather have the chair be in the position of allowing them that time, or if under certain circumstances, obviously someone is up there and their 5 minutes is up and it's apparent that they still have something important to say, that the chair would be in the position of granting them more time as opposed to being in the position of cutting people off all the time.
I'll support you on that.
Well, sorry, sir. This is not about removing any discretion or discretionary authority from the chairman. This is about fairness. This is about if I call Craig 24 hours before I appear in front of this body, I can get additional 10 minutes. The same should apply as a citizen. If I call Craig 24 hours before, I should be able to get some additional time added. I don't think it is up to us to decide that what a citizen has to say must be said in 5 minutes, must be couched so that everything is said in 5 minutes. I don't think so. I think this is about fair play, and this is about fairness.
I think what David's saying is that he doesn't, I'm acting as a go-between again now for him.
Please use your microphone, please. Thank you.
I think what David's saying, Commissioner Galloway is saying, is that the 10 minutes time it can be excessive. And we have seen that. I probably have seen that more than I've seen that 10 minutes is not enough for an individual. And so I think Commissioner Galloway is saying that perhaps it should be an extra 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I thought that's what you said. Okay.
No, what he's saying is that it should be the sole discretion of the chairman to basically grant, if I understand you, to grant additional time when a citizen comes here. So there isn't an option of calling the city to get an extension, to get a 5-minute extended to whatever.
Okay,
right?
so then I misunderstood, and I don't agree with that either. Perhaps we can have some kind of mechanism that if there are a significant number of people calling, then the commission, the chairman can make a ruling of denying any additional time, extra time, in advance.
I am thinking about 10 years or 8 years on the zoning board, many years of going to zoning board meetings of other cities, and the time here. And almost always, citizen comments could be made within 5 minutes. But sometimes, and what comes to mind are engineering studies of drainage and flooding, studies of financial studies that citizens have in opposition, and there've been a few other sort of technical presentations, appraisal stuff. Sometimes it needs more, but it isn't very often, and I don't know how to.
Chairman, may I propose a inquiry here? Is should we divide out the difference between a presentation and a comment? Public comment is comment, whereas the group differential was more of a presentation that does require additional time. Shall we
the
explore
distinction
that?
I would make is testimony and comment, or evidence and comment.
This is in the general meeting section, though, the general meeting article, whereas we address hearings and testimony under the hearing section. And this would be, in my imagination, is that if somebody would like to comment on the workings that we're doing on a comprehensive plan, if they have an idea or a comment during that process, that's where they would do it. If they have a presentation that they would like to give on smart growth to the Plan Commission to inform you on something, that's what I envision these commenting periods would be under this rules, since this is just about general meetings procedures.
Does that make sense to people, if we can find a way to define it?
Yes, yeah.
Stuart, what do you think?
Because that was the example that came to my mind as I was trying to discuss a scenario where somebody might want additional time. You know, they may have discovered a study or a survey or something that supports their testimony or their opinions.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, this is
commentary.
not testimony. This is about citizens providing you guys with comments about current issues, or there may be a matter at hand. There are further on in the rules, there are regulations under the testimony procedures for applications.
I think it makes sense. I don't know if you and the law department or all of us collectively can define it and write it.
I know I gave
we
myself more homework to do, but I would rather it be clear to all citizens on
it makes sense to me that we should try and come back to this section.
I think it can be more robust than it is right now, to be honest.
Is that?
And I think also, I mean, as you do your work, we shouldn't try and complicate this. This is about, if I'm coming here on Monday, I call you. I'm allotted 5 minutes. I say I need more. I should be able to get it if the next person is getting it. This is so simple. So let's just focus on it. If you're not giving it to B, don't give it to A. If you're going to give it to B, give it to A.
Right.
Or remove the 24-hour option and put the sole discretion in the hands of the chairman for both groups.
And I propose I come back to you with some sort of solution based on that as well. So,
The more we try to codify this, the more difficult and confusing it becomes. In the 6 years I've been a voting member of the Plan Commission, I've never had trouble. We've had some very lengthy hearings that have gone on for several months, to be sure. But everyone has had an opportunity to voice their opinions. And as a member of the commission, I have benefited from all of those comments.
Ms. Puda?
Well, I've only been on the zoning board for extensive discussions, although I did sit through a portion of the Presbyterian homes. And I really think that when you give people a time limit, they tend to exceed it anyway, but it gives the chair the ability in a way that doesn't offend people to say, your 5 minutes are over. Please wrap it up. And so I really think it is important to have limits so that people know what the expectation is and so that the chair can use it instead of seeming to be rude in cutting people off. If there's too much discretion in this, then there can be a sense of unfairness.
What we were trying to do is exactly that: provide those expectations and those minimum bars for citizens. Should they ever want to come to Plan Commission, they would be able to pick up this document and understand the proceedings.
A city council is a pretty good example. There's a sign-up sheet, and the mayor looks at it. If there's 50 people, they get 1 minute. If there's 25 people, they get 2 minutes. If there's 5 people, they get 3 minutes. And that's the function of the mayor or the chair, to look and see what the load is. How can we get this meeting underway and accomplish what we have to accomplish? And that's the function of the chair. So it's very discretionary.
The discretion still rests with the chairman. That is not, that is not being, the chairman's authority is not being assailed here. This is a simple issue of this. If a group can call you 24 hours and get 10, this is simple. And what I see happening here is that we've been at this for almost 25 minutes, and it's complicating something that is not really complicated at all. The easiest way, if you want to solve this, one way you can solve this is say this: don't call me 24 hours. You have 20 minutes, you get in front of the chairman, you can ask for additional time. He may deny it, or he may grant it. That's it for both parties. That's it.
I think that makes sense.
No advance?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? No advance notice?
I'm saying that at least will be fair.
Yeah,
That process,
I think so.
at least.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking.
And I would like to say that if you look at what happened with the Presbyterian homes, and they wanted to make a presentation, and we ended up pushing that out to the next meeting, whereas perhaps in that situation, had they had more time, I don't know, but, oh yeah, talking to the mic. I can see.
It wouldn't have mattered.
It wouldn't have mattered?
They needed evidence they didn't have, and they weren't ready. And these rules still provide they could get another meeting.
Okay.
Let me go back to the section on joint meetings. I'm sorry to say I don't think the ordinance provision indicates who makes that decision and how it's made. So another reference back to staff on after people request a joint meeting.
How is it determined?
How is it? Is it going to happen?
All right.
And the ordinance provision provides for a joint hearing, and then the two boards meet separately and each make their recommendations. So you could still get different recommendations, but I think a joint hearing is an extremely good idea.
It's usually a good idea, but there may be logistical problems in executing it that
I have
make
worked
it a
with
problem.
it in other cities and not had any logistical problems.
That's great.
Of course, it's not Evanston, and we are special here. And so you may be right, but I think there are ways to do it, usually. Especially in the situations where they need to be serial, it results in very long processes.
Yes.
Moving on.
Back of the branch.
Article 10, page 10, notice requirements for public hearings. We just wanted to make sure we added language, mail notices shall be compliant with the municipal code. We have regulations depending on what type of application it is and who we mail those to, whether it's 500 or 1,000. Article 11, please bear with us. This is probably the meat of the changes. We're going to have a few here. Item B, the Plan Commission shall issue a recommendation within 90 days of the first presentation by the applicant to the Plan Commission. The Commission, with a majority vote, may hold additional meetings to accommodate extraordinary issues that may arise during the hearing process. The Commission, with a 2/3 majority vote, may extend the recommendation period up to a maximum of 30 additional calendar days to accommodate extraordinary issues that may arise during the hearing process. This is to provide an absolute maximum of 120 days for each application that arises here at Plan Commission. And that clock starts at the first presentation that's provided by the applicant.
I didn't see it earlier, but I don't think you can require a majority vote for additional meetings and still have a time limit. I think you have to accommodate people who come to comment. You have to accommodate the applicant and the objectors, and that may mean there have to be additional meetings to meet this time limit. And I don't think, I think if you're going to have a time limit, the assumption has to be that there'll be additional meetings. I don't, and if you require a majority vote, I think that assumption is not there. If you have a time limit and you don't have additional meetings, then you have the problem that there just may not be time to hear all the people that need to be heard. So I think you can either have a time limit or you can allow the commission by majority vote to call for more meetings. I don't think you can do both.
Well, doesn't that...
Stuart?
I would strike the entire paragraph. It's nonsense.
The purpose of the paragraph is to give an applicant an expectation on when they'll get a ruling. Is that correct?
A recommendation, yes.
More than that. It is to shorten the amount of time.
Yeah.
More than just an expectation, but in actuality.
Well, I don't think there are that many that go for months.
Let the record show that there was laughter in the audience.
We had the Presbyterian home. What have we had in the last 3? I mean, I've been on, 3 years?
Well, there was 708. There was the Mather. The Mather took, I want to say, 5 months, maybe 6.
8 months.
8.
When special uses were in the zoning board, we had meeting after meeting till 2 to get everyone heard, and it would be months. It's not everything, but
it sort of bothers me that we're saying that a small project, uncontentious, and a large project, potentially highly contentious, is granted the same maximum period of time for a decision.
Agree.
I think or I feel that the two last sentences are appropriate, that if the Plan Commission perceives that there are extraordinary issues or circumstances that require either A, additional hearings, or B, extending this to for another 30 days, that makes sense.
Your comment about a small uncontentious project versus a large potentially contentious project, that's where that 30 calendar day maximum can be triggered for that.
I understand.
How many
but that
times
only
can you
gives
trigger
us
that?
that only, if I understand this correctly, that only gives us a maximum of 30 days in addition to the
4 months. You would have 120 calendar days to reach a recommendation to City Council.
I don't know whether that would work.
Yeah, perhaps it should be the 2/3 majority. You can extend it as many times as the majority wants it extended.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm thinking.
You don't like that, Craig?
I can't comment on that at this time because this is a recommendation that was brought forth to me by higher bodies.
So you can't give your opinion to your bosses. Okay, so we'll.
Or he already has.
Already has, yeah.
It's something I would. It's definitely up to you guys to make that decision.
Yeah,
this is a recommendation that we brought forth in an effort to, again, provide the expectation and understanding for applicants to know the absolutes and when a recommendation might be made.
And to David's point, on a very contentious, large project, it's unreasonable. But on a smaller project, it's very reasonable. And
I spent some hours with the chairman of the Chicago Plan Commission today. They get around this problem by meeting during the day. It really works. People don't come to the meetings.
What do they pay?
Obviously, it doesn't work to do that in Evanston. I think the commission should be meeting. I think 120 days, even for something moderately complex, I mean, there are exceptions that need more, is reasonable. But I'm assuming that the commission can meet more than once a month when they have something like that. And I guess I would strike the requirement for majority vote for extra meetings, and probably have a bailout for additional extensions. I think there should be an expectation of meeting more than once a month when we have a complex project, because 7-8 months is going to chase development somewhere else. 6 months is going to chase. 4 months is going to chase it somewhere else. But maybe an escape hatch, and an expectation that there be more than one meeting a month.
What happens when you don't have quorum?
Well, that's one of the reasons to have escape hatch. I mean, it says you need a majority vote, but then you have the quorum question also, which is why I think we don't need a majority vote. If you can't find a date when you can get a quorum, it's impossible. Sure.
So if there's no vote, it would be the chairman who determines.
The chairman will try to, at the end of the meeting, we'll try to find a common date for additional meetings. And if we can do that, we would do that. And maybe for extraordinary issues that arise during the process, we need more than one 30-day extension.
And with that, as you envision it, would the 30-day extension or extensions require a vote of the commission, or would that also be in the discretion of the chair?
I think it should be the commission. Maybe a majority vote, not 2/3. Yeah. But I think it would be better for the commission to make that decision than the chair.
Okay, I would go with that. Yeah. I agree that that some of these projects that I've seen in the zoning board and the Presbyterian homes, the portion of that I saw here, just went way beyond anything reasonable. And so I agree with you that we should stick with the 90 days with perhaps 2 extensions for extraordinary issues and hold additional meetings without a majority vote.
So you're saying a maximum of 60 calendar days?
60 additional. Yeah.
Yes.
Two extensions, and I think they should, it should be 30 and 30, not 60.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
So I have a question. So suppose that one of the interested parties needs to present testimony and they require at least 30 more days. So instead of having, suppose we can all meet twice a week.
Well,
how do you account for extensions that could be strategic just to force an issue?
We'll come to the section on objectors getting an extension, but an applicant should have everything ready. They shouldn't need additional time. And if something comes up, they need to do additional testimony. I think a week or 2 is really reasonable and should be sufficient. Objectors may be surprised by an application, so they would need to hire witnesses.
Run tests.
Yeah. Stuart?
The Central Street project is a pretty good example. The developer came in with some beautiful plans. The citizens didn't like those plans. They had to go back and redraw the whole thing. And that took a lot of time. And then there was a hearing following that.
So what was the total time?
I don't know. It had to be 5 months. And there were many times when we met more than once a month, especially with the Mather project. I think maybe the 708 project, I don't know, but the commission was willing to do that to get the job done.
We've been lucky in that we haven't had to have multiple meetings, but from what I understand, prior to, you guys were meeting twice or sometimes 3 times a month. I've seen the agendas that I've had to pull recently. So it's not uncommon for the commission to meet frequently.
Thank God for a recession.
I guess.
Only
Again, we want to provide
selfish.
we want to provide flexibility for complex projects, but we want to be able to allow developments to be able to come in and understand the expectations. It's expectations that we're trying to provide, and then release valves should something arise during that hearing process.
I'm comfortable with 2 extensions, and if I'm wrong, we amend the rules.
Yeah, I'm also wondering about tying our hands when one of the prerogatives is to ask for advice or even consulting if need be. And that might require some time to prepare. It's one of the prerogatives listed here in Article 3. Page 4, paragraph G, point 5.
Yeah. They are very fast.
So I'm sorry, what was your statement?
She is pointing out that on page 4, the planning division staff can be asked to assist and do studies. And that takes time.
So suppose we need a traffic study because we do not believe the applicant's traffic study, and we have to hire someone for that
Would that be
purpose.
brought up at the first meeting, second meeting, last meeting?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I haven't been here long enough to...
I would hope an applicant would provide you, again, you would receive an application binder with all of those things. And after review, if you do have issues, to bring that up at the first meeting. that first meeting should be a succinct presentation of their application, and the application should be reviewed prior to that meeting, so commissioners are prepared to ask the questions that they need to ask to make the recommendation.
Fair enough. But we, for example, the Presbyterian Homes case, we were given a binder on Saturday morning that was this size. And this was with 4 or 5 days before the meeting, of which, some of us
Right.
work full time.
Well, we've got 5 months. If we do 2 extensions. And if it's not,
You'd be able to have 10 Plan Commission meetings if you
if
did
it's
one
not
every 2
enough,
weeks.
we change the rule. Not written in stone.
Again, we're just trying to bring everything into line of expectations and absolutes here to provide recommendations to council in an efficient manner, but also to allow that leeway for public comment and testimony. Good.
I think we have a consensus.
Okay.
While we're on the recommendations to council that you brought that up, is there, I don't recall seeing it in here, but anything in here about the requirement that it goes to council at the next meeting? Sometimes that doesn't happen if it goes on the agenda, if you can't fit on an agenda. So if you have something that's going 3 or 4 months,
Right.
you can fill in the blanks of where I'm going.
Staff does try to prepare for the next available Plan Commission or City Council P&D committee. It is also sometimes to the applicant to request additional time prior to that meeting, which does happen and can be granted, but we have no regulations that I'm aware of just yet.
They control their own agenda.
Right. So we work to prepare as soon as possible. That's our workflow. And then it is up to agenda control if they have 6 hours of work to do, like during budget season. They may
I assume
push.
There will be some rules adopted to cover the time lapse between the application and our hearing, the staff part of preparation. That will happen too. I mean, the reason things take long is not merely the Plan Commission. Things take long sometimes before the Plan
We're working to improve
before we
our
start.
processes as well for plan development applications, text amendments, map amendments, everything that's going through the department-wide right now. We're working internally.
They're working on their efficiency. Yeah, they're cutting staff and increasing efficiency of
That's
each of
what-
the staff members. There you go.
Actually,
That's
we're not cutting staff.
I'm
in the
joking.
Plan
I'm
division
joking.
right now.
I know you're not. I'm
knock on wood.
joking.
But we would like to make sure that we are providing as efficient time, good customer service to everybody that's here in Evanston. Yes, sir.
I want to ask a question that might be, it's germane. When you do present to the, and I should know this, but when you do present our recommendation to the council, is that generally done by a report? Is that oral? How is that done?
What is provided to the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council is a memo that also details the procedural hearings that happened here. They receive a copy of all minutes. They receive links to all the transcripts as well. They receive a digitized version of the application, which is what we will be proceeding to for Plan Commission members eventually. And then they also receive the initial memo that we provided to you as Plan Commission members as a staff report. So they get all that in a packet. It's 200 pages or so of information.
Is there a way that can be shared with the commission members?
They are posted on the packets online, and we can.
Which packets online?
City Council packets.
Okay, so then we have to know to go there.
We can send a communication out to Plan Commission members.
I would
when that
really
happens.
appreciate that.
I think that would be a very good procedure.
Yeah, because I've often missed out on that because I was not aware or when it was being presented, and
Yeah, we can provide communication to you.
Thank you.
Well, what we are trying to prevent is duplication of sending out materials.
Yeah, you don't need to,
So we want to warehouse
if you want to BCC us on whatever, so we know what are the results of what we've done is being presented and when and what's being presented.
Yes.
That would be really great.
Do you wish to move to F on page 11?
Yes, please. All materials to be presented by the applicant, and it should say or parties in opposition, their witnesses, attorneys, expert witnesses must provide all materials to city staff 3 business days prior to a plan commission meeting so that all materials may be distributed to commission members. This includes all PowerPoint presentations, plans, sketches, charts, and other similar exhibits, letters, and any other material. We move to strike that would support the arguments of all parties and replace that wording with supplementing oral testimony.
After materials, supplementing oral testimony.
Yes. All submissions should be in a Adobe PDF digital format. However, if not possible, the party submitting materials shall provide no fewer than 15 copies to city staff. And now we have a question. Yes.
No, a comment. 3 business days to be submitted to you is not enough to give us time to go through something like that.
You receive Plan Commission packets on Fridays, which is a business day, Monday, Tuesday. There are 5 days between when packets are released and the Plan Commission meeting itself.
So if you got the materials 3 days before, so I'm assuming then that has to be 3 full business days,
3
right?
business days, yes.
So you get it on a Thursday, so you can get it to us on a Friday.
Yes.
Okay.
That is the spirit of this rule, is that we have all materials that are available to you as possible digitally prior to a meeting.
It doesn't say what time on Friday, but that's good. I think you guys work fast. It's great.
Well, this isn't a comment on that they don't work fast. This is a comment on that they're not being given material soon enough. With enough lead time.
We've had a couple instances where we have asked for materials to be provided to you prior to a Plan Commission meeting, and we've been pushed that there is no such rule that requires any sort of materials, and I think that's a disservice to Plan Commission members to receive all materials prior to a Plan Commission meeting.
I think if you think you can do it, that's enough time.
You want 5, 7, 10?
I think the way it's written is a little vague.
Yeah.
That someone could say that, I mean, you're asking that it be the Thursday before the Wednesday meeting. Is that what you want?
I would need it by Friday by 5. Okay. Friday by 5.
Friday by 5.
Yes.
So end of business day, that third business.
At what point?
You get it Friday by 5. So I would actually say Friday by noon, because we distribute packets digitally on Fridays.
Is that enough time? If you had it Friday by noon
Yeah.
to
Why wouldn't you
distribute?
want it on Thursday?
Don't you need a Thursday?
I just attach it as a PDF, to be honest.
You don't review it?
Oh, yeah.
Don't you have to review it?
I mean, things like presentations, we obviously review them, but we don't make revisions to any testimony. We just distribute information. I mean, that's our process.
If it works.
So if you receive a document Friday at noon to be distributed and you can't open it or it's corrupt, there's no timeline then to get a new copy?
I would contact the individual immediately. I mean, as soon as I get information, I look through it to make sure that it's consistent, but I don't read the materials and ask for edits.
There's a
I'm not expecting you would. I'm just saying.
If it's corrupt, yes, I would ask for a revision, but to add that to the rules of expectancy. What I could do is into business on a Thursday, provide that material.
I would think that would I'm arguing for you that
Right.
you need more time, is what I'm saying. Not that I'm not trying to find a reason why you're not going to be able to get it done. I'm trying to point out that you need more time.
But it's harder for applicants and objectors.
But an applicant knows that they've made this application and they've had at least a month, if not probably more.
Usually by this time, their application is done because we've had to review it for site plan appearance review, et cetera. So I will make corrections and bring that back in November.
Okay. It also should say at least whatever the period is, so they don't think they have to get it on that particular business day.
Right. Yes. Yes. It would say something to the effect by the end of business the Thursday prior to the Plan Commission regular meeting, or I guess 4 business days at that point. There is a correction on item G, where it says court reporter should say chairperson, since we do not have a court reporter anymore.
Another request to the law department. Who can administer oaths? Does one need to be a notary, et cetera? I mean, I think chair people could be notaries if it's necessary, but we need to look at that.
For clarification, are you discussing administer oaths for the purposes of the applicant and the hearing?
Administer oaths for the purpose of taking testimony.
Taking testimony. Okay. Yes, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item J, we have a revision by chairperson. Peters?
That's what I was asking.
It should read, any such material submitted to the secretary. Is this what I should be reading for item
I think
J?
so.
Yeah, okay. Any such material submitted to the secretary or his designee 3 business days prior to a hearing will be distributed to the commission members so that they may be read prior to the meeting. Otherwise, such material must be submitted prior to the close of evidence. And
What are you reading for?
He's
it
reading.
is a new.
He's reading what's.
I apologize.
If
This
you
is
look
what is
at
handed
J
to me.
on page 12.
Yeah.
My question was, when? When should this happen? And what I suggested was, if they submitted 3 days in advance and however much time you needed, now we're looking at 4 days in advance, it can be included in our packets. And we can read them ahead of time. And we tell people if they submitted that much in advance, the commission members will have it and read it before the meeting. If they don't submit it in advance, then they can submit it during the meeting, and it will become part of the record as long as they submit it prior to the close of evidence.
And I have another question. I would agree with that, but I have a question in general. It says a person may not testify on behalf of another person, group, or organization. Does that mean a lawyer can't get up here and testify? I mean, they're providing testimony, right? That's what the lawyer for the objectors did.
They should not be providing testimony unless they appear as a witness. And if they appear as a witness and we've sworn them in, then they can give testimony.
Okay, so...
But not, I guess maybe you're right, it's ambiguous.
Okay.
It's meant to say, in effect, that let's say you're not here tonight, Seth, but I would like to speak on your behalf.
It's for the situation.
You are not present, but yet I am speaking in essence of you. But we wanted to write it.
It says the following.
I understand that, but that's not what it says.
We can revise it. Attorneys cannot give testimony. They can only give argument, but we will revise it.
Okay.
In another section, it allows attorneys to give testimony if they take an oath and say they're appearing as a witness.
As a witness only.
Right.
But they still do that for a group. So the objectors to the Presbyterian homes had an attorney give testimony for the group, make a whole presentation.
They have to represent which capacity they are speaking. If they're speaking as a witness, they can testify. If they're not speaking as a witness, they cannot.
But they can make argument
Yes, that's
for
correct.
someone else.
It's a distinction that's often confused.
Okay.
So another piece for you to
Sorry, I'm giving you so much homework.
look at the wording.
And I think as well, when you're looking at the wording, I mean, if I were to read this, I would think it might possibly mean that one person can't testify on behalf of a group or organization. Is that what it's meant? I'm not talking about attorneys at all.
No, that's...
You're talking about individuals?
Individuals speak on behalf of organizations.
So the alternative then would be for the group to come and speak in unison.
That's correct.
You're right. You're right. It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. Chairman?
I should have been a
Mr.
lawyer.
What sometimes happens is a neighbor will come in and read a letter that someone else has prepared, and I think that is what is being addressed here. At least that's what I've seen fairly often.
We will come back with revised
Okay.
language for this.
Thank you.
Item N is a new additional item as well. The commission shall allow items to be placed on a consent agenda upon receipt by the planning office of a written request by the applicant pursuant to the following conditions. Staff recommendation of approval, applicant agreement with staff report conditions, and there is no one present at the time of the hearing who wants to speak or introduce evidence in opposition. Chairman Peters, I believe you had an augmentation to that as well.
I just suggested that if someone is present, that we describe it in terms of removing it from the consent agenda rather than putting it on, because presumably it's already on the consent agenda. And also if a commission member wants to discuss it, we should be able to, at the meeting, remove things from the consent agenda. A whole bunch of items are grouped together and voted on together.
Right. So when we come back with text amendment language that we've often had to revise or modernize, placing them on a consent agenda for approval with our staff report attached to it prior to the meeting, you review the report. If you have any questions or concerns, we want to make sure that there's provision that you can pull a singular item off of that consent agenda.
There are also some ordinance and statutory requirements for hearing that may not be met by consent agenda, but not for everything. So,
and again, that would be under staff review, that if we notice that would be a regulatory component. Item Q is a little long, so I apologize. We wanted to make sure that we had the time limits added as far as the expectation that the chairperson may at any time make adjustments to those on a case-by-case basis. Item 2 is, this is all procedural in how a hearing shall be heard. So we've placed time limits on each component that concerns presentations, cross-examination, statements of opposition, etc. Item 2 is a presentation time of 20 minutes for the applicant. The Plan Commission, item 3, the Plan Commission will then hear testimony or evidence from persons in support of the applicants. Their time limit is limited to 5 minutes per person in support of the applicants. Item 4, we accidentally put a time limit. There should not be a time limit under cross-examination procedures.
and the reason for that is if a witness knows there's a time limit, they may well not answer any questions.
The Plan Commission will then hear testimony or evidence from all persons opposing the request. Time limit is to 5 minutes per person. All those who provide evidence shall set forth how said evidence applies to the applicable standards. Questions?
Is that really necessary for a witness who provides testimony to then recite exactly how it applies
of
to a given standard?
Evidence as opposed to comment. Comment, I think they can just say, it's going to hurt us, it's going to hurt the neighborhood.
Right.
But if they do evidence...
The evidence is you've provided a traffic study.
Right. Well, doesn't the attorney sum that up and make the point and show how that complies with a certain standard? Why would the traffic expert have to say how this meets the standards?
Good point.
I will note in the last plan development presentation that you had, each component did address the standards of the plan development, and they did point out how their traffic study addressed the standard of the plan development. Mm-hmm. We're trying to be consistent with how presentations
I actually appreciated that.
Yeah, that was good.
Even if I didn't agree, I still appreciated it. So we're going to keep that in?
Yeah, I'm looking to see what we're doing with comments that aren't testimony or evidence.
Well, the only persons, I think, that need to be sworn in are witnesses. I mean, people that are just providing opinions about how lousy a project is or something like that need not be sworn.
We do swear them in.
Well, we do, but I don't see that we need to do that according to this. It's only witnesses that need to be sworn in. That's on page 11G.
So why is it that we swear people in with comments today?
Good question.
Because we don't know in advance whether they will make comments or testimony.
And they can slip from one to the other very easily.
And it's a distinction that's not known to the general public.
Yeah.
And again, this is pertaining to hearings. Procedurally, there are citizen comment times prior to, as part of your regular meeting component. So this applies to the testimony component to a hearing.
But we need to take citizen comment on during the hearing, even if it's not evidence, I think. I think neighbors and others get to come and say, should be able to come and say, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And here's what I think.
Is that during your defined public comment period during a regular meeting?
I think as part of the hearing process.
Okay, so there needs to be an extra component here for citizen comment?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out when.
We had them for both. Recently for Royce Moore and for Presbyterian Homes during the hearing.
And I think citizens expect to be able to make that. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to figure out where it should be. Mr. Steele? Ms. Feldman?
I'm sorry, could you please go to a microphone? Thank you.
And swear in. Get yourself sworn.
You can come.
I'm sorry, we don't have established rules for that yet, so you can't speak.
Identify myself.
Please do.
I'm Jessica Feldman. I live at 525 Grove, and I've watched Plan Commission for a long time. Stuart probably could speak to this, but my recollection is that you've got your applicant, you've got your 500 feet or 1,000, depending on what it is, and they're legitimate objectors. And then usually after that, there has been a period of time for people who didn't qualify to be objectors to make comments. How do they fit in here? I mean, attention is not quite the same to those comments as to the 500 or 1,000 feet people. But they do speak. So they need to be addressed. It seems to me.
Shall that be after item 6? Or item 5, I guess.
I think that makes sense. And actually, the continuance section should probably be after the applicant's case.
Here, because on 8, you're just saying that they can cross-examine people that testified against in opposition, but you don't have that. The comments, I guess. I'm thinking of questions. Does this also give them the right to go after public evidence or public comments, or no? Just evidence.
It's to rebut. I
Right.
think.
But you said there's a difference between public comments and evidence.
I have a question of legal. What's the difference between testimony and commentary?
Thank you. That's what I was just asking the chairman.
I think this is written as if there isn't a distinction.
Based on my limited reading of just the specific issue, I think it does need to be fleshed out, the difference between evidence and public comment. Just to give you just a brief understanding, I think that the commissioners can consider the evidence, but the public comment is just for, under now labeled number 6, I can insert text that would state something regarding this requirement does not apply to public comment. That might help.
Yes, but 7 talks about testimony, and then testimony versus public comment. So I don't think you can have the applicant rebut a public comment, but you can have.
That's correct.
That's right.
Yes.
So, and therefore, you need some kind of definition.
We will add it. This is great to have this exercise and go through it with you because we see the loopholes.
I think maybe 7 should be moved up also to be after the applicant's case.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice to have the discretion to, if there is a continuance, it would be nice to have the discretion to take comment from people who oppose something so they don't have to come back to a second hearing if there is still time left. So
is it the consensus to add that as well?
Is there agreement on that?
Can you repeat that?
I think that if we put the section on continuances after the applicant's case, which is, I think, where it needs to be, it would be nice to have the discretion, if time remains, to take public comment so that people don't have to come back to a second hearing.
Yeah, I would.
If they're here at the first hearing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Other than that, I think it works.
Next page. 14.
I kind of like the argumentative and irrelevant arguments. I'm just joking. Just joking.
We have driven the journalists out.
Yeah.
In that way.
No, they were just taking pictures to so they can get credit for being here. College students, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They just wanted to prove they were here.
They have heard we have recordings, so now they're going to watch us in the recording.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why my mic. That's why my mic was off.
Yeah, they perked up.
I'm not sure I understand number 10 on page 13. It talks about re-examination by persons with a legally protected interest. That'll be our defined interested parties, I presume.
Yes.
And questions from persons opposing the request may be allowed. Is there a distinction there between someone decided to capitalize persons, meaning interested parties, and saying that they can do a re-exam, and people who are not capital P persons or interested parties can only ask questions? And I guess I'm wondering what's the difference between re-examination and questions. Just I'm trying to understand what the distinction is that number 10 seeks to make. All I'm saying is it's not clear.
Yeah,
I can't tell what the intent of that sentence is.
My best guess just by reading this is that it's to recall witnesses, to re-examine them based on rebuttal testimony from number 9.
Okay, if that's
my
and that
reading
can only
of
be
it.
done by interested parties.
That's what it's limited to right now.
Okay,
But
although we
but
don't have
persons, you're correct, is not defined. I don't know if it's defined earlier in the
Okay, I think
document,
maybe
but I don't know
interested
if
parties
it
would
should
be
be
a-
capitalized. I
Okay,
don't think
I
that
think
that's
interested
correct.
parties would probably be a better term than persons, particularly since persons is used lowercase as well as
What-
uppercase.
And because we're going to be defining interested persons now.
What I
Exactly.
think what happened here is that the statement "persons with a legally protected interest" and "interested parties" have been interchanged throughout this, and we need to clearly define one definition and replace or amend accordingly.
Right, and be
So-
sure it's consistent throughout.
Yes.
But that still doesn't answer my question about the second part of that sentence. Questions from persons opposing the request may be allowed. Is that meant to apply to anybody who happens to oppose the project?
I think I think it's not clear.
It needs to be rewritten.
And let me ask the commission members, as a policy matter, do you want cross-examination by people who aren't within 1,100 feet? I think that's not an easy question. I don't think we've had that distinction in the past. Stuart, did you make that distinction before I came?
I would favor cross-examination by anyone.
I think that's been the practice in the past. We might want to direct questions through the chair so that they turn out to be questions instead of commentary, but I think I think it shouldn't be limited to legally interested persons. But it does make for longer hearings. What do you people think?
Well, I'm in agreement.
So maybe we've simplified the job of writing this because we will not limit questions and cross-examination to...
Capital P persons or lowercase p persons?
Yep. all natural persons, and even unnatural people or corporations.
Oh, it's not that weird. Yeah, corporations, people.
That's the word natural persons.
So would it then come down to reexamination of the applicant's rebuttal witnesses
Now, there's another.
and questions from persons opposing the request may be allowed?
I mean, if we aren't distinguishing.
Once again, it's discretionary on the part of the chair.
If we're allowing everyone to ask questions or cross-examine, then we don't have to make those distinctions.
Who's
That's right, but is that what we intend to do here? That
Who's everyone?
Everyone is everyone.
Yeah.
Well, then you have,
Attendance.
you can't do that. Then you have a free-for-all.
Well,
So what you're saying is,
but we haven't limited it. To my knowledge, it hasn't been limited in the past to only people within 1,100 feet. So
Yeah.
we've taken questions from. They mostly live in Evanston, not South America, but we've taken questions and allowed cross by anyone.
now, at this point, it's number 10. Or maybe the items numbers have changed, but it's number 10. So we've had the applicants rebutting evidence of persons opposing the request.
Well, my policy
And-
question is about the whole
Oh, the whole thing.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regardless of who's
I-
cross-examining
you know,
whom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
you're saying
Okay, but
anybody
what
that-
happens at the end? The applicants have rebutted the evidence of people who oppose the project. And then, is the final step, number 10, directed to the rebuttal of the applicants?
I think
Or
it's-
is it just wide open?
I think it's a cross-examination in response to the rebuttal.
Okay, well, that's not clear at all here.
I think that's what it should be.
Okay. If that's what it should be, then I think that's what it should say.
And I think we should, I mean, I hate to say it because it's so time-consuming, or it could be so time-consuming, but I don't think we should limit cross-examination to people within 1,100 feet.
It's people who've given evidence, not given testimony. It's evidence, right? It's not the comments, it's the evidence.
Well,
Because what I'm hearing here is comments, is what I hear you guys saying, and that's kind of, I think, kind of nuts. That's opening up Pandora's box to allow, this for anybody who's come up here and given a public comment.
Let me give you an example.
Give an example.
Evanston Hospital wants a change in a planned unit development. So people within 1,100 feet come and they say, Evanston Hospital is awful because it will ruin our property values, and so on and so forth. And other people in the city may want to come and say, we need a Class 1 medical facility in Evanston. And they may have some cross-examination of opponents. And I think they are interested parties even if they're not within 1,100 feet.
I don't see how you cross-examine somebody that just comes up and says, my property values are going to go down.
You say...
Hang on, let me finish. If they come up and give testimony with evidence that shows how their property, and they put together charts and they have some official appraiser that makes that testimony, then I think you should be able to challenge and have a rebuttal against that appraiser and the person giving official evidence, not a concerned citizen. And if there's 100 of them, allow this, Evanston Hospital's attorney to rebut 100 people who come up.
I think you say, what is the basis for that opinion? And they say, I just know it. And then you're done with cross. Or they say, I have done a study, blah, 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 but I think someone should be able to say, what's the basis for that opinion? Because if someone says my property values will go down, that's an opinion. It's not a comment. It's an opinion.
And for the Evanston Hospital to testify that the property values will not be impacted, is that an opinion?
Yes. And if they say, you know, when you say, what is the basis for that opinion? And they say, we just know it. We look out and the houses look nice. That's telling.
Yeah, but so they're going to bring in their experts that say that this will have no impact. And I grew up across the street from Evanston Hospital, so I'm pretty aware of the impact. But they're going to say there's no impact. Now, they're professionals, so I believe that you should be able to question them. I think on an opinion, it's an opinion unless it's being offered as testimony. That's why we have public comments. Public comments are opinion, and that's why we had that conversation on earlier as to why do we swear people in.
But when you ask them the question, then it becomes obvious it's an opinion, and you're done. If they
is that you as the chairman asking it, or is that so for every single person that comes up, we expect that we should give the applicant the right to cross-examine them?
You know, if you're handling it right, and you've got 30 people, then you could ask all 30 people. You could state, if you have some basis for the opinion, tell us. And if they have a basis for the opinion, they tell you. I don't think you have to say every single one.
I think it will be quite onerous to have the applicant's lawyer or the somebody from the applicant team to challenge every person that comes up and makes a comment. I don't think that's right. I think they should only be allowed to do that if it is a testimony under oath that they're testifying as fact. Does anybody else have comments here? Or am I beating a dead horse?
I think you might be making a bigger deal out of it than what it is. I mean, we went through the entire process with the Presbyterian homes, and people gave their opinions, and I don't remember anybody challenging an opinion because they recognized it as an opinion.
But we didn't give them the opportunity, the process opportunity to do that.
This process is actually not really changed. A lot of this has been existing. We've modified our time limits and clarifications of some items.
I don't think we ever denied.
Worked on this back in 2009.
I think we have in the past let people do that. They don't usually if it's clearly opinion. If it's not clearly opinion, people ask questions. Stuart?
I probably would strike this whole thing. This is exactly the kind of thing that falls to the chair's discretion. And if you think cross-examination is appropriate of a given witness, then allow it. And if you don't allow it. I don't think we have to codify this.
Now, this document holds cross-examination until the end of the applicant's case.
Yeah.
And that may mean witnesses have to be, well, I guess if we're limiting the case to 20 minutes, they'll all be here.
Yeah.
Never mind. Never mind. So you think we should simplify this and just have order of presentation?
I wish it would go away.
I would strike it. If I had a vote, I'd strike it.
I certainly don't want this sentence number 10 to be there. There's something else to replace it that makes sense about what we talked about.
I mean,
fine. Otherwise,
we need something if there are going to be time limits, because it has to say what's limited.
Just to jump in here, the process was spelled out years ago because of a famous Clarion decision. And under Clarion, I don't know if number 10 is required, but I believe it was inserted probably for that point.
Part of Clarion was subject of a statute. Part of it's gone.
Right.
But part
No
of it's
longer
still
relevant, right.
But part of it's still relevant. And maybe we can simplify this, but I think we have to, if we're going to have time limits, we have to say what's limited. And maybe we'll just ask staff and the Rules Committee to take another look. Does that make sense? Oh, yes. Now, before we do that, there are some time limits in here, and that's what's new. Do the commissioners have comments on the time limits? Assuming we can figure out what's limited, do you have any opinions about the time limits?
I would give a petitioner at least 20 minutes.
Or
instead of 10.
For closing?
For closing.
I actually think that makes sense.
They presented in
20.
So why would you give them the same amount to close?
It's true. They need to respond to the opponents. Maybe 10 is too short.
We'll make it at discretion.
They're also provided an additional 3 minutes rebuttal closing prior to or after a opponent's 5-minute summary.
This is exactly why I don't like time limits, I'm sorry. Because I think you handled it perfectly, Mr. Chairman, at the press homes, and you said, I think you gave him 15 minutes or something like that.
You are more kind than I am toward what I did then.
But it was sort of based on your sense of the issues and what had to be covered.
But may I interject one thing? What we're trying to do, again, is provide expectations. These time limits may change dependent on the case-by-case scenario. What we did not have the expectation then is I was asked, could I have 90 minutes for a closing? And I would have to go to the commissioner and say they want 90 minutes. He would say, well, let's do 30. And then I would have to go back and say, well, he wants 30. And they said, well, how about 60? And it was back and forth.
Actually, they said there is no basis for limiting us at all.
Yeah. And then, when you pushed hard enough, they would say, well, where are the rules?
And they said that many times to many people. It was in my hate mail.
So we're trying to provide expectations, both as a service to you and an expectation to a petitioner and citizens as well, that they can speak within a reasonable time frame. Any other? The remaining items here are procedural. Only speakers recognized by the chairperson may speak. It's more of a decorum kind of item. Questions shall be addressed to the chairperson. Answers and follow-up questions by the commission shall be reserved until the end of the presentation.
There's 3 terms we've been using sometimes interchangeably, especially commentary and testimony, when there's a legal difference between testimony and evidence.
Testimony and evidence, I think it would be hard. Comments would be different than evidence.
Okay. So testimony and evidence are different.
Yeah. Testimony is maybe a more ambiguous term.
But it's definitely not commentary, because at some point in the discussion we were.
I think evidence is not commentary.
Likening.
Yes.
But testimony is maybe a more ambiguous term. And we have other lawyers in the room who can tell me when I'm wrong.
I think they're the same. I think they are offered to prove a fact at issue.
But I think comments would also be included by the word testimony.
Yeah.
When I think about testamentary, whereas evidence is supposed to be factual.
Right.
Okay.
And the word testimony is broader.
Couldn't you look upon
comments being achieving the level of testimony when they are made in this kind of a forum.
I actually had a session a few weeks ago about translation from Chinese and these words, which does not make me an expert, it just makes me confused. But I think we can define them and draw distinctions. And
Okay, so I have a couple of more comments on points 11 through
go ahead.
through 18. What do you mean by cumulative? Because hopefully testimony would be cumulative.
Cumulative means they say the same thing.
That to me is repetitious.
You're right.
Cumulative means adding
Cumulative is good.
additional things.
It is good.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say if it's cumulative, hopefully it will be cumulative, otherwise why are they talking?
Yeah. You're right. Strike
Testimony
cumulative.
is very close, in my view, to arguments, right?
It can be.
So saying that an argument cannot be argumentative. I'm just.
Oh, it's argumentative should definitely not be prohibited in closing. Yes. Because that's what it should be.
I'm just being a pain here, but.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You catch the things that the rest of us didn't see.
Then, same thing in point 18. And it's actually, point 18 is repetitive itself. Repetitive closing arguments, which is cumulative, repetitious, harassing, argumentative, or relevant. So repetitive is there already.
Very nice.
Sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That would mean multiple closing arguments, right, from opposition individuals, right?
Yes.
So repetitious if commenter 1 comes up, provides closing, commenter 3 says the same thing.
We should spell that out.
Yeah.
But then the issue is not that the closing argument is repetitive.
Right.
It's
It
the
should say
same closing argument is being repeated.
Yeah.
Could it be duplicative?
Or we could say repetitious of closing arguments given by others.
Or
That sounds to that.
well,
Okay.
Or we could say duplicative.
That's what I had.
thank you.
Too many words.
It's good.
Too many words. Argumentative arguments.
There'll be no argumentative argument.
The last item that we have to discuss on this is page 15.
We're not past 22.
Oh, I apologize. Plan Commission's decision shall be in writing, contain its recommendation based upon the record. The decision shall be accompanied with findings of fact related to the relevant standards.
Now, when we finish, it's not in writing.
That's right.
So,
I'm sorry, what was that?
When we finish,
In writing.
there is no decision in writing. It's reduced to writing later. So this provision could be read to mean we're not finished until we have reduced it to writing.
Or we could just say the decision shall be in a statement that contains its recommendations based upon the record.
Now, we could say the Plan Commission's decision shall be forwarded to the council or its subcommittee in writing, and that solves the problem.
Yeah. And we need to make sure that we get a
we don't
copy of
want
that.
someone to come back to us and say,
Where's your written,
Commission, you didn't write it.
We will change the wording so that it simply states that the Corporation Counsel office will write up the Plan Commission's.
I don't even think you need to go that far. It's transmitted in writing to the, and as Seth asked, we probably should get a copy.
Keep you guys honest.
Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt, but.
Thank
It's fine. The last item is Article 13, recommendations on amendments, unique uses, and plan developments.
Pardon?
Item C.
E.
Or D. Gosh, I'm
E?
sorry. It's been a long day.
What?
Item E, as in elephant.
Here's a-
Adoption of report by the commission is solely for the
D.
purpose of attesting that the report accurately reflects the recommendation of the majority in the voting record. Votes for adoption of any report by members who voted against the prevailing motion shall not be construed as a change in position. Our recommendation is actually to remove this, as it's vague in what actually a report is and what when you would actually be voting on it. Again, as a recommending body, what does that reflect? Staff doesn't understand that reflection of this amendment.
There is no report. There is no final writing, is what our point was from the previous
Yeah,
thing.
that's why.
That's why we're recommending to remove this.
It should be removed.
Unless we changed the procedure that we as a commission should approve the report that goes to council. Because to date, I've never seen a report that goes to council on our recommendations.
I think we should not. We should receive copies. It should not be in our procedure to approve it. If it turns out that it's highly inaccurate, it can be raised as new business and looked at by the commission. I think the option's there. I don't think it needs to be in the rules.
While I have not communicated, and I apologize for not sending you copies, all recommendations from the Plan Commission have been as accurate as we possibly could.
I'm not questioning that. And by the way, there have been a few others before you, and they haven't done that either.
I don't see any. In requesting copies, I'm not arguing, alleging, or concluding that they haven't been perfect.
We just want to see them.
Or implying.
So we're okay with taking this thing out?
Yes.
I hope so. I have no idea.
Having finished comments on the rules, let me ask the members if they've had a chance to read the minutes, and do we have a motion? If you haven't had a chance, it could be done quickly, because they are short. Do I hear a motion to correct or approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
Does anyone need more time? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That brings us to the census update. Craig, this is your report. So.
Moving on to more interesting items than partly procedure. I wanted to spend a little time tonight to give you kind of a base synopsis of some of the census materials that we've been receiving over the last couple of months. I've made the rounds. I was asked to speak at with the Evanston Community Foundation with nonprofits pertaining to the census and how they might better be able to use that information for their planning purposes and in the future. We gave them a brief overview of the types of information that we provide, and tonight I wanted to kind of share with you some of that information. Now, please note that we are continuing our research efforts. There's a lot of data to go through. We have a lot of general information on the census, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions that you might have tonight, but I may not have the absolute answer for you. We're going to talk a little bit about the complete count effort, what happened in 2000. We're going to talk about the general profile of the city as it stands based off of that result, the housing characteristics of the city, some additional information that we're being provided that wasn't part of the 2010 census, but are continuing efforts by the U.S. Census Bureau for Evanston. And then the next steps of what city staff will be doing with information based on the census and there's a couple conclusions that I want you to take away tonight of what's happening here in the city. The Complete Count effort was a community outreach effort that I was the staff point person for. It involved a communication to all of our institutions, educational outlets, religious institutions, community groups, to get the word out on why the U.S. Census Bureau conducts this 10-year activity. This is the 100% complete count of every citizen in the United States. It is bounded under the Constitution and is required every 10 years. This is the most absolute, one of the most robust census activities in the world. And it's one of the longest as well. About $400 billion currently. We don't know what that number is today based on current budgetary issues. But about $400 billion a year is decided based on the census count. So we wanted to ensure that 100% of Evanstonians, people residing in Evanston, were counted. Some of the concerns that we had going into this is over the last 10 years, things like identity theft, not trusting government entities, people being concerned during the economic downturn that they might be double counted in a house, or unfortunately some people have had to double up with families due to the economic downturn, and they're afraid being counted at that time that city or state officials may come after them because we would know exactly where they live, which is not true. We don't know the exact address and number of people living in those homes. We are only given the baseline information that's provided from the Bureau. So some of the interesting things that they used were the utilization of technology. We were able to, and I'll show you here in a minute, track on a day-to-day basis once they got it up and running to see the rate of return of all the addresses here in the city. And we were able to adjust our message on a daily and weekly basis during that count effort. And I do want to say that we had a higher return rate than 2000. It was a 1% increase, but considering the conditions that we had, I think it was a very successful program. Some of the things that they did, obviously, were ads, pamphlets. The form itself was simplified. There's no more short form. Sorry, I'll go back to this. And there were only 10 questions. The whole message was 10 minutes, 10 questions. And the form looked like this. It was the first page was information about your house, information about whether you owned or rented. And then there was a sheet for each person. This is the bilingual version of it. There's a sheet for each person to describe their ethnicity, age, and how they relate to one another in the house. We here in the city use the website as a communication tool. Like I said, we had information in both English and Spanish. We posted as many links to external websites as we could. We had a tailored message that we could do on day-to-day. This is how much has changed in the last 2 years or year and a half. This is our old website, but this was our main page. We had census, cityofevanston.org/2010 census as our main website, so you could go to here and get all the information that you would need. But then we also created these other pages that would track on a daily basis. These were widgets that the U.S. Census Bureau gave us, and as you mailed in your form, there was a barcode that would scan it, geolocate it, and upload it to the website server. And then daily, we would get these updates about 4 p.m. every day to see which parts of the city were returning at higher rates or lower rates, and we could tailor messages if we needed to. So let's get to the numbers. Everybody wants to know those. This is the general profile of the city. Bottom line is 74,486 people were counted in 2010. That's 247 more residents in Evanston than there were in 2000. 52% of them are female, 48 are male. And again, how do we look at this information a little bit deeper? We look at census tracts. I'm sure everybody has seen this kind of map before. These tracts do not change. They are constant year to year. So we know exactly what's happening in those, and we'll be, over the next few months, examining those tracts as well. I wanted to show you this quick chart of our population over the last 60 years. We are above our population than we were in 1940, but well below our post-World War II boom that we had. So we can see a steady increase in population over time. Yeah, we had 80,000 people with much less housing units, so housing population was or family population was much higher back then. So one of the things that we do is comparative analysis of our population, and this is one of our first tools that we use is what's called an age pyramid. This is the city of Evanston in 2000, the age demographic. Red is female, blue is male. The younger population is on the bottom, the eldest population is on the top. So this is our population. Please note that this bar here is a little of an anomaly because we are a university city, and that is typically the college education, college crowd. So this is the 2010 pyramid. And again, that 20 to 24 has stayed constant, but what we've seen, obviously, is that our pyramid is becoming more of a cylinder. People are living longer, and they're getting older, and the baby boom bump is pushing through at a higher rate in our age pyramid.
Same rate.
Everything's kind of starting to even out. And I'm just showing one example tonight. This is 8092. This is what is one of our NSP2 West Evanston tracks that we've been looking at. And I wanted to kind of look at how does that differ from the city of Evanston. This is their 2000 information. Obviously, there's not as much of the 20 to 24. There's a much younger crowd, but you can see obviously where that 5 to 9 is the interesting one, where it moves up to the 15 to 19. So a lot of them have stayed. Presumably, that we're assuming that a lot of those that were 5 to 9 years old in 2000 continued to live in that area during that time. So we'll be able to do this kind of analysis for each geographic area of the city, but that will be coming up at a later date. Wanted to give you a quick little breakdown what happened between, and again, we like to compare what was then, what was now, what's happening now versus what might be happening then. One of the most interesting facts is that we've seen a decline in Africa and people identifying under African American or Black. We've seen a decrease of about 24%. But we have seen an increase in 2 or more races or some other race. So there is the potential that some people might be identifying larger with a more multicultural background. That was an option that was provided for in the 2010 census as more detail that we're seeking out from individuals to provide that diversity. One note is that we have seen a rise in Asian population. One thing that we might be able to attribute to that is the university itself gathering more international students. Questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Next, we're going to talk about...
Actually, I do.
Yeah.
What did you find? I assume there are some undocumented people living in Evanston, and I also would expect that they wouldn't be that eager to sign a census form.
Do you mean undocumented as in illegal immigrants? Or, okay. One of the big messages that we had is that the census doesn't count based on nationality. We count total numbers.
Right, but aren't people unwilling, if they are undocumented, to fill out the form at all? And do we have any estimates of how many people
that's such a
may have
moving...
refused just because they were frightened?
We wanted to convey the biggest message possible, that this is for everybody living in the United States, regardless of nationality status. I cannot estimate or comment on how many might not have filled it out based on their fears towards that. But we wanted to convey the most positive message possible of counting as many people in the United States as possible. Commissioner Freeman.
Do you measure Hispanic in any way?
We do.
Okay, that's coming up. It's not on there, so do I assume Hispanic?
It's not a race.
Right, I understand that. So
race is a cultural identifier. The graphs that I'm not showing tonight doesn't have Hispanic on here, but I can tell you about 9% of the population identifies themselves as Hispanic. That is an increase from about 6% in 2000.
That's what I had heard, that was a significant increase.
Right, but again, it's a cultural identifier and not a race. Just like two or more races or some other race, more people may have been identifying themselves over the last 10 years as that.
In the dimension, it will be hard to compare because the census of 2000 confounded both dimensions. So you could have people who are culturally Hispanic, but they ticked the white box.
Right. So one of the breakdowns that they do is when you do check the Hispanic box, there's Hispanic white only, Hispanic African American or black, Hispanic some other race. They break it down by the race cohort as well. So we can look at those and see how they're identifying as a race as well. But again, I can't comment if that's a migration of people that are Hispanic that are moving into Evanston, or if it's a greater identifier that they're willing to provide to the census at this time.
And they still haven't completely detangled the cultural, because you have African American, which is not really a racial thing, you know. So if you ask me, are you a Hispanic, and you put African American or black, I wouldn't check that box, because you have African American there. It's a cultural thing.
Correct. Moving on to housing, which we're always concerned about. We have 33,181 total housing units that were counted in the 2010 census. That's a comparative of about a 7% increase in total housing units in Evanston. Unfortunately, about 10.43% of them are vacant at the time of this count. And they break that down into vacant and for rent, or vacant vacation, seasonal home, or duplicate home, second home, et cetera. But I did want to note that 46% of those were identified as for rent, whether they're for rent for home or for rent for apartment building. That's not classified in this information. But I thought that was an interesting stat that a little less than half were for rent. Of the homes that are occupied, 55.3 were owner occupied, and 44.7 were renter occupied.
Craig, when was the census count made?
So the enumeration that they do is April 1st, 2010. And that's not to say that you have to fill out your form April 1st. They actually wanted you to mail it in prior to that. The effort happened over from March 1st, or from February 1st to March, or to April 1st in 2010.
Fair to say the 10% doesn't reflect student turnover or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah, and they actually, we talked about that as well. They are on a quarter system, but it's not. It was actually during their spring quarter, and it was during their midterm week. So they were definitely here if they were counted, and we did work with the university to get the message out. We worked the response rate for the group quarters count for Northwestern, which is their dormitory system, was a 99% return rate. So they definitely did their part in making sure that people were counted here. I've created a whole bunch of different ways to show information, and so we can track, again, by census tract. This is the total units, so you can kind of see what happened over the last 10 years and where things were being built. Of note, you have about 1,400 units being built in 80, 94, 95. Those are the downtown area census tracts. So that's where the largest enumeration of our construction was done. But we've seen over the last 10 years about 2,300 units built. And again, these are charts just to show you how we can look at this information in multiple ways. This is the occupancy rate. Anything in red is a negative, which means that those are unoccupied at this time. And then vacancy shows the reflection of how many more vacant units. Right now we have about 3,100 units that are vacant, and that was an addition. And again, this is from the 2010 census. Housing always changes, but it's good to understand this information during the complete count.
So vacant is defined as people do not answer the door?
Do not answer the door, or there was no return of the response, the form. Once the form went out and it wasn't returned, the U.S. Census Bureau goes to each property up to 7 times at various times of the day, days of the week. That's when you saw that massive force of people being hired to do that. And that was one of our messages too, was if you return your form, you're saving the federal government money, because it costs about $95 per house. I think it was 95 or 75, something like that. But it's a lot of money to do that, and if we can get that number down, we're all doing our part to ensure.
The vacancies could be inflated if, you have illegal immigrants living that don't want to answer the door.
Absolutely. So we had to do our best foot forward to ensure that that vacancy rate was as accurate as possible.
Do you have a sense from the census of 2000? I know that the census releases an imputation of certain ethnicities.
Yeah.
For illegals, do you know what percentage was imputed for Evanston?
I haven't seen an imputation for that just yet. They've changed some of the ways that they're enumerating information, yet I haven't seen any of that information. But I haven't been looking for it, so that doesn't mean, there's about 800 different ways you can slice up the information. I wanted to show household size. We've had a slight decrease, but it's stayed at about 2.25 per household. If you're owner occupied, you're more likely to have more people live in your house unless you're renter occupied. And the average size in 2000 was 2.27. So I wanted to share with you some additional information. A lot has changed in the last 10 years in how the census provides cities with information. One of the biggest changes is the American Community Survey. That is what used to be called the long form. Does anybody remember hearing about the short form, long form in 2000? The long form is about a 3% estimation, 3% sampling of citizens or houses here in the United States. 1%, no? Was it 1? Yeah. I think it's 3 now. I think that's what they're trying to up that percentage a little bit. So what they instituted was the American Community Survey, which they actually sample yearly. They do 250,000 homes a month in the United States. They send out a long form, and that includes things like commute time to work, mode of transportation to work, what kind of industry you work in, your ethnicity, this larger poverty status, it's how much income you make, et cetera. But when you do just a 1 year sample, it provides a wild, depending on the variables, you can't get what they call a 90% accuracy or confidentiality rate, or confidence rate, sorry. It's 945, I apologize. And that's 90% of the information is as accurate as possible. So they do this 1 year study, and there was the 1 year study released for this year, but they also do a 3 year aggregate. Once they receive those studies, they do a 3 year aggregate so they can actually drill down a little bit more into the geography. The 1 year estimate is only for cities or places that are over 65,000 people in size. So we're lucky we're able to get this 1 year estimate every year. But we also look at the 5 year aggregate, which gets down to the census tract level. There's enough sampling that's done down in the tract level that we can start to see these demographic information on a much more localized level. So we'll be doing a lot more analysis over that. And there'll be the 2005-2009 5-year ACS is out, but they'll be updating that with a 2006-2010 ACS that will provide us a little bit clearer picture of what might be happening on the ground. So the next steps, like I said, is a complete data analysis of the city, trying to drill down a little bit more to see what's happening on a localized effort and what is changing radically in other areas that might be staying the same in others. And then integrating all this information into GIS so that we have a visual analysis so people can quickly understand what's happening in their neighborhood, in their neighbor's neighborhood, and be able to kind of understand the makeup of our city itself. So just a quick conclusions that I want to give you is, one, we had a population increase. We had 247 people. That's great. We have a housing stock that is clearly showing vacancies that can only improve our population over time. We have an aging population, so when we think about planning, I hear a lot of trends of communities out there now seniorizing their communities to make sure sidewalks are as safe as possible, or updating improvements to ADA standards, et cetera. And we have a shrinking household size that is a continual year-on-end trend. So if we are to grow our population with the current trends, that would mean that more housing stock. But again, we have a vacancy of housing stock, so our population can have some expansion without really game busters explosion. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the population I think is about 74,000 now, and that is counting the Northwestern students as well.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so when they're not here, what is our actual population? Do you guys have any idea what we're dealing with?
We don't do a population count on breaks because the university runs essentially year-round, so the break that they have is only a few short weeks or months. So to get that kind of accurate count during that time is hard to estimate. Thanks. Yeah, we go count everybody. But.
Yeah, but I mean, in the summer, undergraduates go home, right? And that's a sizable population at NU. And half of Kellogg, I mean, almost all Kellogg go home too. So I guess my question is that, is there a percentage that if we know that, is there, everybody, you probably know the population of Northwestern, so you know how much, what the student body is.
I mean, if you can enumerate their group quarters and subtract that from the total amount, that's probably a good estimation. Not all undergraduates go home, depending if they run summer courses here.
2,000 people, if you count, their cohort is like 2,000. So
2 or 10?
2,000. So you have 4 years, you have 8,000 undergrads, roughly.
So about 8,000 total.
Yes, 2,000 graduate students, roughly. You can find the counts for each year in the Northwestern page.
So you could imply that during the summer months, about 10,000 people leave the city, which is about 64,000 people left here. But again, we count on April 1st, 2010. That's our enumeration day.
Okay, and also, I mean, in terms of allocating services in the future, if the assumption is that there are people who may not be in a position to fill the survey that is coming to them, then is the city in the future going to make assumptions that, okay, in terms of allocating city services, there is a population that has not been accounted for in our system? So so the 74,000 may actually be maybe 78,000 or not.
We try to account for everybody. We worked with every social group out there, everybody that was ADA, that couldn't read English, that was blind, deaf. We had a lot of those stakeholders at the table to ensure that as many people were being counted. One of the interesting things was we have a small Haiti population, and that was during the hurricane that happened, and we knew that some refugees were actually being housed here, and we reached out to them as well because we know that that's a typically undercounted population. So I can't answer you on those that were not counted, but I can tell you that we did our best faith effort to ensure that everybody was counted. So for planning services, we can only listen to our stakeholders on what they need or what they're seeing on the ground. I know it's not a good answer. I know it's not a good answer, but we can only do our best effort to ensure that people stand up and count themselves.
Other questions? Thank you. That was a really good report.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
It is 10 minutes to 10. And we have the plan update and committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Now we have only the plan update, if you wish to do so, to present.
I would rather be more prepared for November.
In that case, we have finished all of the business on the agenda. Is there any new business? Hearing no new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned.
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Second.
Don't we have to second it?